Hello and welcome to the channel. As always, like the video, and if you enjoyed the story, leave a comment on if you would want more. This fan fiction was not created by me, but in the description there is a link to the fanfic so you can show your support to the creator and read along. Without any more delay, let's dive into the story.
Ainz had stepped through the gate and waited for everyone to come through before closing it. Their time in the Ainz kingdom had been very productive. He was still angry he didn't kill that Philip scum, but that would be remedied soon. No one would think twice about him disappearing on his way back to his lands. They might have their suspicions, but they won't have proof. Once he returns from the Baharuth Empire, he and Philip were going to get very well acquainted. I wonder if the human body has a limit on how many times something can be regenerated. Ainz planned on figuring out the answer to this question with Philip. He wondered how many times he could cut off his hand and feed it to him before it would stop regenerating. Hopefully, for Philip, there was an answer to that question. If there wasn't, Philip would be in for centuries of that experiment. Ainz would deem human regeneration infinite if it lasted for a millennia. Now, he had to deal with the unpleasantness of heading to the Baharuth Empire in just a few short hours. To make matters worse, neither Taylar nor Albedo was coming with him. Taylar refused, saying she would just kill Jerkniv if she saw him again so soon, and he was honestly glad Albedo wasn't coming. If he wasn't so sure about Taylar's abilities, he would think Albedo was having triplets or more. She had gotten very big, still as beautiful as ever though, if not more so to Ainz. He didn't want her leaving Nazarick anytime soon, so any time she willingly stayed, he would be happy. Right now, they were in the throne room, telling all of Nazarick how everything went in the Ainz kingdom. The whole accounting of their time, there went well. Ainz had a feeling there would be some, or most, of Nazarick joining him to get to know Philip. Have you decided who is going with you to the Baharuth Empire? Taylar leaned in her throne to ask Ainz. The rest of Nazarick was discussing what they all learned from the moments ago. Albedo thought that a good idea as well. You should let them know since they are all together. I'm sure whoever you chose will be thrilled to accompany you. Ainz looked at both his queens and knew they were right. He was leaving shortly anyway and hadn't told anyone they were coming with him. He knew he needed to choose those that hadn't come to the Ainz capital with them so he could give everyone a chance to travel with them. Since neither Taylar nor Albedo was coming, he was going to make one exception for that, but everyone else would be different. He held up his hand, and the room quieted immediately, allowing him to speak. I shall be leaving for the Baharuth Empire shortly. Taylar and Albedo will be staying here. All of you who accompanied us to the Ainz kingdom were perfect as always. As such, I will be taking some of you with me to the Baharuth Empire. First, Albedo did a great job as an ambassador, so I would like you to accompany me in the same role once more. I'm sure that's why you're taking her love. By the sound of it, Taylar didn't buy his excuse for one moment. Albedo giggles at her statement, letting him know she didn't buy it either. They were both right, of course, but it was the diplomatic thing to say. Second, Yuri will be staying with Albedo and Lupus Regina will be staying with Taylar, so I would like for Narbril Gamma to join me in the Baharuth Empire. The Pleiades looked absolutely ecstatic that she was joining Ainz. He was a bit surprised. If anyone enjoyed going to kill monsters for Ainz, Taylar, and Albedo, it was Narbril Gamma. Finally, Fifth, Foss, Sixus, and Fiore did a wonderful job in the Ainz kingdom, and I would like to give more of you the chance to travel with us. As such, I would ask Decrement and Increment to join me as well. Ainz saw they were all excited, and no one voiced any objections. He truly didn't expect any to, but he always waited to see if anyone would. He dismissed them back to the rest of their day and allowed the ones coming with him to grab anything they needed. He only asked Oriole to stay behind. He didn't want to ask them in front of everyone, so they felt they had no choice. Luckily for him, They came as a pair during most of the day, so he only needed to ask Oriole to stay behind. Oriole, I wanted to know if you wished to join me as well? Father, why didn't you? Ainz already knew what she was asking. Because you would think it a command. I am asking you, not telling you. If you do not wish to accompany me, that is perfectly fine. So, what do you think? Oriole only looked like she thought about it for a second before she answered. No thanks. That was all she said. Albedo and Taylar couldn't help but giggle. Ainz couldn't let it go at just that though. Any reason why? I do not wish to see that self-important ruler they have again. I'm afraid I'll turn him to dust if I do. Also, I wish to help Mother since she is taking over for Mother Albedo until she has my siblings. Ainz just nodded his head at that, and Oriole left. There was no need to talk to Swear if Oriole was staying. It wasn't long before he was alone again with no one but his queens, Seabass, and their maids for the day. The moment they were alone, Taylar laughed at him. Good ambassador, she giggles. While she did do a good job, we all know why she's going. Taylar threw him a wink, knowing what he was doing. Not that she minded, it was only for 2 days. Albedo added her own teasing. Our wonderful king was just being diplomatic, my queen. But you know. Albedo rubs his thigh. You do still have some time before you leave. Shouldn't you be resting, you little minx? I'm sure you can wear me out in no time, your majesty. Ainz and Albedo disappeared before Taylar could even say anything. She laughs and looks over at Seabass. Go spend some time with Swear, Seabass. We will see you after Ainz leaves for the Baharuth Empire. Seabass bows and Taylar disappears as well. Seabass knew his monarchs would be busy until the very last possible moment. Jerkniv was close to pulling his hair out. The carriage of the exalted king of the Psycho Kingdom had just entered through the front gates, and he was making sure everything was perfect. He had already pushed his luck and paid for it twice. He would have to be smart from here on out and choose his battles wisely. It would require a lot of patience and a lot more planning. First, it would mean a perfect visit from his new overlord. He had to show he was a loyal vassal who would never do anything against his liege no matter what he was planning for the future. This time, he needed to make a much different lasting impression. It all started with what he learned from his new ruler's trip to the Riestei's kingdom. The entire road from the front gate to the entrance of the palace was lined with people. He learned they were very displeased none of the common citizens were there to greet them upon their arrival. He would not make the same mistakes they did. Jerkniv was waiting on the steps to the palace with every servant he had. They were all spread out perfectly and hadn't moved an inch since he set them in place. The very first thing Jerkniv planned to do was have himself, his remaining nobles, and even his whole staff bend the knee to Ain's old gown. It wasn't just them either. He had the head of the Imperial Magic Academy as well as the head of the Royal Air Guard, Royal Earth Guard, Royal Guard, his 3 remaining Imperial Knights, Flutter Paradine, and the head of the 8 Knight Orders of the Empire present as well. They would all bend the knee with Jerkniv. He already knew Flutter was downright giddy at bending the knee to such a powerful magic caster. As he waited, he thought enough time had passed to at least see the carriage approaching, but he did not. He did see a soldier riding as fast as he could toward him on his mount. Jerkniv hoped more than anything that nothing had gone wrong already. You could never tell how common people would react to such a change, especially when that change was now being ruled over by beings who were anything but human. The knight stopped his horse at the base of the stairs and ran up to Jerkniv and kneeled. He supposed he could enjoy this for a few more minutes since his new title didn't warrant people kneeling to him anymore. Rise, good sir. What news do you bring? My emperor, I. Do remember not to call me that when our new king arrives, soldier. Yes, sorry, Governor Jerkniv. His Majesty's party dismounted the carriage when they saw the people inside the gate and are now walking to the palace. It will take them some time to get here judging by how many people His Majesty and his ambassador are talking with. What Jerkniv thought would be bad news turned into great news. It was obviously the right thing to do lining the streets with the people. He already had a tick-up on the Riestai's kingdom. He was tempted to tell the servants to go clean the chambers again. Jerkniv knew if they walked, it would take a couple of hours to get there, and he had to make sure everything stayed perfect. He never got that opportunity, as he saw someone float up into the sky above the city. He couldn't tell exactly who it was, but the jet black wings gave him an idea. When he heard the voice boom over the city, there was no doubt who it was, and Jerkniv panicked when he heard the message. He needed to get to Ainz, Olgown, as soon as possible. Ainz was pleasantly surprised when his carriage rolled through the gate of Arwinter. This trip was already starting out better than the one to the Riestai's kingdom when he saw all the people lining the streets to greet him. He did see the people looked very nervous, though, and it was understandable. Taylar, Albedo, and the Pleiades had killed a lot of their family members. Luckily, his memory was insanely good now, and he knew it was just over 42,000 dead. Ainz already knew what he needed to do before he even did it. His luck and charisma stats were immensely helpful in winning people over, but he also had to use words to put them over the top. Unlike Taylar, Albedo, or apparently Albedo, he couldn't simply put people at ease by standing there. Ainz was certain it had something to do with their beauty. He knew their presence was just as powerful as his was, but everyone, male or female, seemed to relax in their presence. In his presence, though, it worked to some extent, but nothing like it did for them. Ainz had the carriage halt the moment it entered the gates. Albedo and, well, everyone else in the carriage stared at him. They were no doubt wondering what he was doing. As soon as he opened the carriage door and stepped out, they all seemed to understand and followed him out as well. Ainz didn't miss all the eyes widening the moment they saw him. Ainz knew his subordinates would love to protest at him talking with these people, but he also knew they wouldn't do so in public. He started walking toward the palace and spoke to some of the people as he made his way. It didn't take long for Ainz to notice the people lining the street were getting more comfortable with his presence the more he talked with them. He thought he was doing rather well only a few hundred feet down the road. The moment might have taken a turn back to fear not long into the walk, though. Ainz had been speaking to an older woman, and when he looked up to move on, he noticed two elves with collars staring at him wide-eyed. Both of them were far from the line of people, almost hiding from everyone else. It got his blood boiling that there were slaves here still. The people around him seemed to notice the change in the air and separated to allow a path for Ainz. Ainz didn't mean to do this, but the elves looked terrified now. Their wide-eyed stares held something akin to wonder, possibly even hope before. Now they looked like they were going to piss themselves. Ainz reined in his bloodlust, took a deep breath, and the pressure in the air went back to normal. He looked at the elves again, and they seemed a lot more relaxed, but certainly not comfortable. Come here. Ainz motioned the two elves forward. They both looked extremely hesitant to follow his command, but they did it nonetheless. Surprisingly, they both took a knee in front of Ainz when they did get near him. Rise. They do, and Ainz continues. Are both of you still slaves? They both nod at Ainz' question, either too scared to say anything or unsure how they're supposed to talk to a king being slaves. The thought makes Ainz want to rage again, but he keeps himself in check. Is your owner here? Why, yes, Your Majesty. One of the elves finally decided to address him with words and slowly points his finger to Ainz' left. The crowd departs swiftly, and only one man is left standing there. The elf is pointing right at him. You. Ainz points at the man.
Come.
Here. Ainz' tone left no room for argument. He doubts the man would be stupid enough to do anything but what he commanded anyway. The man stood in front of Ainz, trembling like a leaf, and it gave Ainz a little satisfaction. How many slaves do you own? T10. Why, Your Majesty? It gives Ainz a great deal of pleasure to see this man about to piss himself. As much as Ainz would enjoy that, he needed something from this man first. How long does it take for you to get to your home from here? The man looked dumbfounded. He was obviously not expecting that question to come out of Ainz' mouth. He obviously knew not answering would end badly for him, so he says, T30 minutes. Why, Your Majesty? Death Cavalier. One of the soul eaters being ridden by a death cavalier approaches Ainz for instructions. This man has 25 minutes to get to his home and free the other 8 of his slaves. I want you to follow him, and if he fails in his task, bring him back to me to be dealt with. As you command, Your Majesty. Ainz was grateful to see the man piss himself when the Death Cavalier spoke. Their voices really were terrifying to hear. The man took off in a mad dash when he came back to his senses, and the Death Cavalier followed. Ainz realized Jerkniv was smart by lining the streets with people, but the fact that he didn't think to free all the slaves before Ainz came made him irrationally mad. He jumped off the ground, spread his wings, and soared up into the sky. Ainz didn't stop until he was a few hundred feet above the city of Arwinter. He wanted to make sure he was in a good spot for everyone to hear what he had to say, even those far away at the palace. People of Arwinter, I am the exalted king of the Psycho Kingdom, Ainz Oilgown. Today, you will officially become my people, but a grievous error has been made that I will correct now. Slavery is a thing of the past. It shall not be tolerated in any form or fashion in our kingdom. I ask every being wearing the collar of a slave to come to the main road of Arwinter. Line up for me so those that hold you in chains can bear witness to the future we bring. Any who prevent a slave from coming shall be dealt with as harshly as possible, and any who own a slave from this day forth will meet my wrath and wish they were never born. Ainz's voice boomed so loud over the city. Most of them were sure those in the countryside around the capital heard him. Ainz descended once more and landed in front of the 2 elves who were now staring at him in awe. The moment he landed, he grabbed each of their collars and broke them off their necks. Both reached for their now naked necks, and a tear slowly escaped their eye. Ainz wanted to blow something up at the ring around their neck, but he kept himself calm. Ainz looked down the road and saw people with collars walking toward him. He did not realize how many people would be coming here in chains. He knew he was going to need some help with this. There were 4 people whose help would be very beneficial right now. It was time to send a few messages while the slaves lined up. Judging from the amount of them, it would take quite some time for them to finish lining up. But first, Hanzo Black. Everyone witnesses a humanoid in a black outfit emerge from the shadow of Ainz Oilgown. Task the other Hanzos and the shadow demons to scour the city. If you find anyone unwilling to let their slaves leave, detain them and bring them to me. As you command, Your Majesty. And the shadow disappeared back into the shadow right in front of their eyes. Jerkniv had finally made it closer to where Ainz Oilgown should be. He could only tell because he ran into row after row of people standing in line with collars on. His grand plan for tomorrow was backfiring on him spectacularly. It was already dooming this visit before it even began. When Jerkniv finally did make it to Ainz Oilgown, he was not alone. There was the king, Ambassador Albedo, 5 maids, one looked to be a higher rank than the rest since her outfit was much nicer, 5 elves, a dogkin, and a human teenage girl. Pestonia, I wish for you to keep track of any of those who have immediate family here. Itoil and Celeste will assist you with anything you need. Henry, I would like for you to help with those that have no family, and Ashrin, I would like for you to address Evrio Dash. Ainz didn't get to finish his instructions as he was interrupted. He knew that voice well even if he had never met the man. It set his blood to near boil hearing the former emperor speak. Your Majesty, I heard Dash. Jerkniv dismounted and tried to speak with Ainz, but before he could get more than 4 words out, the air grew heavy as Ainz spread out his wings. He pointed at Jerkniv, and the former emperor went to his knees forcefully. Everyone around except those from Nazarick and Karn had looks of fear in their eyes. Ainz didn't quite care at the moment. He had more pressing things to worry about right now as he stalked toward Jerkniv. Do not ever interrupt me when I am speaking with my subordinates. Ainz is grateful to see the fear in the man's eyes as he bends down to talk to him. You think you're clever, huh? Lining the streets with people to get a leg up on the Riestai's kingdom. Jerkniv wouldn't have a comeback even if he could speak right now. Ainz had no intention of letting him answer that question. If you are so clever, you would have known there is nothing we detest more than slavery. There wouldn't be thousands lining up on your main road to be released from their chains. So, Governor, do you still think you're clever? Ainz did relent the pressure a bit, so the man could speak. I was supposed tea to be done tea tomorrow morning. Tea that way, His Majesty see good witness them, all being set free. If you were so clever, you'd have set them all free and had them line the road to the palace. And if you were smart, you would have had them throw their chains in celebration of them becoming a part of the Psycho Kingdom. However, you are not very clever or smart, are you? And I know just the punishment for your idiotic actions. Ainz stands and looks at the crowds. The pressure is still intense, but it is mostly directed at Jerkniv. He can see only some of them are still scared right now. Slaves of Arwinter, today is the day of your freedom. No longer will you be chained and sold like property. You shall all be free to choose your own path in life. This man, Ainz points to Jerkniv, was your former emperor. No matter who owned slaves, it was his laws that allowed such a thing to be lawful. Ainz paused to let the hate sink in for Jerkniv. He couldn't physically torture the man for sending invaders, but he could torture him in other ways. I will break your chains, and my subordinates shall hear from each of you, on this day, to find you a safe place to live. Your former emperor will apologize to every single one of you on his hands and knees for allowing such a fate to befall you. That brought a loud cheer from all the slaves as Ainz turned back toward the group he was addressing. He didn't need to worry about Jerkniv. He wasn't going anywhere for quite a while. Ashrin. Yes, your divine majesty? I must speak with Oriol. Could you address the crowd for me while I do so? Biba. I couldn't possibly say anything that could match what you just did, my king. I have faith you can, Ashrin. You have had plenty of practice in your sermons, and we have spoken at length about capturing an audience. I know you can do it. Ainz truly did have faith Ashrin could handle this much better than she thought she could. He still saw her hesitation about following his speech, but she nodded her head, spread out her gray wings, and jumped up to float in the sky for everyone to see her. See, you're already captivating them. Nothing like a beautiful elf floating in the air with a pair of angel wings to draw your attention. He chuckles before he turns away with one last thought. She's going to save me from so many speeches. People of Arwinter, I am the High Priestess of Life and Death, Ashrin Kelsey's. Like you, I was a former slave to a horrible and abusive master, but that was just the beginning of my story. My god and goddess took me and my two companions to their city to begin a new life. In the few months I have been living as a free elf, I have seen things you can only believe if you see, and accomplished more in those few short months than I ever thought I deserved before I moved there. The first person I was introduced to was the mayor of Karn, Enri Amat. Ashrin motions to the blonde human, and Enri awkwardly waves at the crowd as they all look at her. You could imagine how I felt being taken to a human city after all I had suffered at the hands of my former master, but Enri and all the residents welcomed me and my companions as though we had lived there our whole lives. Enri has become like a sister to me, and there is no better person to lead our great city than her. Ashrin saw Enri blushing in embarrassment as all eyes turned toward her again. She was pretty sure it was from the praise. Enri didn't really take compliments all that well. But that is not all that makes Karn great or their majesties' rule over us. Karn is a city for all. We have humans living alongside elves, goblins, ogres, and even the undead. It is a place where all are allowed to prosper, learn, and become what they want to be. Ashrin paused as she was taught to let those words sink in. She wanted everyone to know and realize they could be more than property if they chose to be. Now to do what she was taught again. Give all of them solid evidence it was the truth with indisputable results. You need not look any farther than 4 of us standing before you to see the truth of my words. I was nothing but a slave to a cruel and sadistic master. I felt safer being used as a means to find traps than I ever did when we were in a town. And look at me now. I am the high priestess of two gods who walk among us. Ashrin pauses for a moment and points to the ground where Henry is standing watching her speech. Mayor Henry Amat was a farmer only a few months ago. Now, she is the mayor of the fastest growing city in the world, raises her sister as a good mother would do, and is one of the most educated people I have ever met in my life. Henry blushed at the praise, but Ashrin moved on as she pointed to Tina, then Sarah. My sisters in all but blood, Tina and Sarah, were slaves of the same cruel master I had. Now, Tina is the head scout for Karn, and Sarah is loved by all in Karn for her druid magic. If our divine majesties can turn the four of us into what we have become in only a few short months, imagine what we can accomplish together. Normally, you would want to hear cheering for the speech Ashrin was giving, but the place was as silent as the grave. Ashrin was very encouraged by this, not discouraged. If everyone was this silent, it meant they were listening to every word she said. It was time to finish them off. So allow His Divine Majesty to strike off your chains. Allow the grace, kindness, and caring of my God and Goddess to free you from your past. Allow us to help you start new lives of your choosing without the fear of ever being put back into chains. It will be a decision you will remember for the rest of your lives. This I promise you. Ashrin floated back to the ground, and a thunderous cheer went up the moment she hit the ground. She couldn't help the smile that adorned her face when everyone cheered. She didn't get a chance to do anything else before she felt a hand resting on top of her head. She turned to see her god smiling down on her. I told you that you'd be fine, Ashrin. The blush from his praise and head pat was easy to see. Now, let's set these people free and show them a fraction of the might of the Psycho Kingdom. Ainz didn't stay around to explain himself to Ashrin or anyone else. He leapt into the air and floated above everyone. Ashrin assumed what was about to happen had something to do with his conversation with Princess Oriole. She didn't have to wait long to find out she was right. A magic circle appeared in front of Ainz as he extended his hand, and she guessed Princess Oriole was helping him cast whatever spell he was about to. Triple. Widen magic, mass break item. The moment Ainz finished a spell, a single sound echoed all throughout our winter. Clink. Every collar snapped in half and fell to the street at the feet of every slave. Most of them looked at the ground in disbelief or started rubbing their necks, not sure if they were, in fact, dreaming. Only a few seconds passed before they all realized it was reality, and a mighty cheer went up once more. Ainz's feet hit the ground once more, and he turned to give his last instructions to everyone he brought from Nazareth. It only took a moment for Ainz to give them their final instructions. Just as Ainz was turning to head toward the palace, two Hanzos appeared from the shadows, and both had an old man in their grasp as they appeared. Your Majesty. Hanzo Black, the designated leader, stepped forward. The city has been searched, and all slaves have been released. These two were the only ones that were preventing their slaves from coming to your summons, my king. You and your squad have done a great job, Hanzo Black. Leave the two who brought the nobles back and a shadow demon for each of those I summoned here for their protection. You and the rest of the Hanzos and shadow demons shall accompany Albedo and me to the palace. As you command, your Majesty. Narbril Gamma. Narbril steps forward and bows to her king. How may I be of service, Lord Ainz? I want you to stay here and make sure the governor and these two nobles properly apologize to each and every one of these slaves. If you feel any of their apologies are lacking, you have my blessing to teach them a painful lesson, but don't kill them. I have plans for each of them. Once you have finished, Oriole will open a gate for everyone to go where they need. Bring Jerkniv and these other two nobles with you when it is completed. As you command, Lord Ainz. Ainz pats Narbril on the shoulder and motions for Albedo, decrement, and increment to follow him to the palace. Each fell in step behind Ainz except Albedo. He motioned for her to walk next to him. Ainz didn't stop to talk to anyone else as he felt he might just scare them all away. He felt much better, but he was still raging on the inside. He knew exactly what he needed to truly relax, but that would have to wait until he got into his room in the palace. He honestly didn't think anyone would pay him any mind as he made his way down the road with everything else that was going on at the moment, but he was mistaken. It started as a murmur that he could barely hear as he walked down the road, but it quickly turned into a loud chant the farther down the road he walked. Of all the things he had been called and named, this title gave him the most pride. Breaker of chains. Breaker of chains. Breaker of chains. It started with the humans and elves lined up on the road with their broken collars at their feet, but it quickly spread to everyone lining the street. Ainz had no doubt it was loud enough to be heard all over the city after only a few seconds of the chant. Ainz walked a good distance before summoning the carriage to them and riding it to the palace. The last leg of their journey was swift, and it wasn't long before Ainz, Albedo, Increment, and Decrement were standing in front of a very nervous and very confused head butler. The man didn't seem to know what to do without Jerkniv there, which was a little disappointing. If Ainz, Taylar, or Albedo were not present and Seabass was meeting a foreign monarch, he would know exactly what to say and do. It didn't make it that much more difficult, but Ainz simply wanted into his room so he could relax for a bit. He knew it would take a while for all those elves to get finished, and there was something he had been wanting to do for a while now. This seemed as good a time as any for it. The only thing that didn't make Ainz want to scoff at the ridiculous butler was his reaction when Ainz informed him there was no need to show Albedo to her room, because his room was her room. Ainz supposed the Emperor has had a mistress for a while, so it wouldn't be that big of a deal to the man. Ainz made sure that the man gave Increment and Decrement rooms near him and not with the servants. It was the only time he thinks he saw the butler show any emotion other than nervousness, when he smiled a bit at Ainz adamantly stating everyone who came with him would be given the same type of quarters as he was. After that was done, Ainz made sure Increment and Decrement would know where to show Narbral Gamma, where her room was. Once he finally got that handled, he was finally going to be alone in his room with Albedo. The room was about 3 steps up from what he saw in the Riestei's kingdom, but it was still shit in comparison to Nazarick. He had something more important to do than change the furniture this moment, so he sent a message to Narbral. Narbral Gamma, when you are finished up with the slaves, have Sheltir send Enri, Asherin, Tinia, and Sara back to Karn, but bring the others with you to the rooms. I have need of them for a little bit before they return to Nazarick. I will see it done, Lord Ainz. I know you will, Narbral. How much longer do you believe it will take to finish up? A couple of hours at the least, Lord Ainz. Judging from the pace, I'd say 3 to 3.5 hours. I can speed it up if you require us sooner, Lord Ainz. No, that will be fine. I could use all 3 of those hours. Just remember to send a message when you are headed this way. I will be preoccupied. As you command, Lord Ainz. Ainz finished his message and stepped into the room to join Albedo. He saw her walking around the room looking at some of the furniture and decor. She didn't look disgusted or impressed by any of it. She simply looked curious. See anything you like? Ainz was surprised to see Albedo startle at his question. He didn't think it was possible to sneak up on her, and it wasn't like she didn't know he was standing just outside the room a moment ago. No, not really. I just don't understand why everything is gold. That is how those from this world show how wealthy or important they are. The more gold you have here, the more important you think you are. Well, that is just pathetic, I know. Ainz grins at Albedo, who smiles back at him. She was obviously in agreement at how he finished her thought. Any ruler, worth anything to their people, should know that their people's happiness and safety is what truly measures whether you are great or not. Albedo was quick to close the distance between herself and Ainz after he said that. What woman wouldn't be drawn to a man who thought as such? Albedo placed a soft kiss right on his lips and went to step back again, but Ainz stopped that from happening. She looked at him in wonder, but He didn't leave her wondering for long. I know you have no desire to be a queen, regardless of how good of one I believe you would be. Ainz saw her about to protest, but he stopped her with a shake of his head. However, I still want the world to know you are mine and no one else's. Ainz reaches into his pocket and pulls out the little black box that had been burning a hole in his pocket all day. He opens it up, and Albedo can't help but gasp. Ainz pulls out the ring and holds it up for her to see properly. The band looked to be made of two different metals. One half of the band was completely black, while the other half was pure white. Both halves were detailed meticulously to resemble angel wings. The top feather of each wing curled around at the top to form a setting for a gem, while leaving the perfect space open for a gem setting right in the center. The gem that was set into the white wing was a black diamond. The gem set into the black wing was a yellow diamond, and sitting right in the center of both of those diamonds was the clearest diamond Albedo had ever seen. Just like Taylar and Albedo's rings, there was a speck of red in the center of the clear diamond, and Albedo quickly realized it was a drop of Ainz' blood, just as he had put in Taylar and Albedo's rings. Ainz had taken the ring out of the box to put it on Albedo's finger, but that wasn't possible at the moment. Ainz can't ever recall seeing Albedo like this. Both of her hands were covering her mouth and nose, and tears were flowing steadily down her face. Ainz would be lying if he didn't hope for Albedo to shed a tear or to enjoy at seeing the ring. However, he certainly didn't expect nor want the river of tears he was seeing. He guesses he should feel good she is this happy, but he really wished she wasn't crying so much. Ainz did the only thing he could think of after she stared at the ring like that for a couple of minutes. He slowly ran his fingers up the wrist of her left hand, so she would relax at his touch. It only took a second for her to relax, and he kept going until he had a gentle hold on her left hand. He moved it between them, and when he moved the ring to put it on her finger, he almost laughed and ruined the moment. Albedo's eyes hadn't left the ring. Even as he went to put it on, she followed it like a cat would a laser pointer. Ainz slid it on her finger and was at a loss for what to do. Albedo hadn't said a word the whole time, and she was still looking at the ring. He assumed she liked it, but as he said, she hadn't said a single word, so he wasn't truly sure if she did. I hope it's to your liking. Ainz couldn't stand the quiet anymore and had to say something. At least his words got a response from Albedo, but it wasn't what he was expecting. She looked at him, and his knees almost buckled with all the love he could see shining in them for him. However, even if he would have fallen, he never would have hit the floor. Albedo then immediately launched herself at him, wrapped her arms around his neck, and crashed their lips together. Ainz was stunned at her aggressiveness, and she certainly had the strength to be aggressive if she liked to be. It didn't end there, though. Ainz didn't believe this could get any more stunning, but it did. As soon as their lips met, Ainz felt Albedo force her tongue into his mouth. He was still trying so hard to understand this super sexually aggressive Albedo that he had no idea Albedo had forced both of them back with her speed until Ainz slammed into the wall. Albedo never relented claiming his mouth, and neither did Ainz. It was sudden, but it certainly didn't hurt, even if the wall had cracked and broken behind him. Ainz finally caught up to the moment, wrapped his arms around Albedo, and slammed her into the wall next to where he just was. That part of the wall broke as well, but didn't deter either of them from their battle for dominance. Clothes were soon following the bodies being thrown around the room, and Ainz had an even better answer than anything Albedo could have said with her words. The last 3 hours, 17 minutes, and 41 seconds had been the longest of Narbril Gamma's life. Having to pay attention to those 2 weak, sniveling humans was a test to her patience she did not like one bit. Lord Ainz instructed her to make sure they properly apologized, so she couldn't just stand there and tune them out. The only reason she didn't go completely crazy was that she got to smack them around a few times when she didn't like the sincerity in their apologies. Okay, it was more than a few times. She even got a little too carried away a lot of those times, and Pistonia needed to heal the little insects so they didn't die. She was glad for Pistonia then. Lord Ainz did say to punish them if they didn't apologize properly, but he also wanted them alive. Narbril had finally finished up, put those two in the cell Lord Ainz asked, and was now making her way to her lord's chambers with everyone he requested previously. She was not sure why her lord wanted everyone to come back with her. Narbril hoped she hadn't let Lord Ainz down already or slacked in her duties. If that was why Lord Ainz had her bring help, she would never forgive herself for that. Narbril examined the palace they were walking through on their way to Lord Ainz's room. While it was the nicest building she had seen so far in this world, it looked like a shitty attempt at someone making themselves feel important to her. Everything was gold, and that got annoying really quickly. She had no idea why someone would make all of the crap out of gold. The craftsmanship was subpar at best to her. The toilets in Nazarick were better made than this fancy furniture and decorations. Luckily, she didn't need to look at this shithole too much as she reached Lord Ainz's door fairly quickly. She did notice the crack in one of the doors, but paid it no mind. It didn't surprise Narbril this place was falling apart. As she pointed out, the craftsmanship was subpar to begin with. When she knocked on the door, however, even she didn't believe the craftsmanship was so poor half the door would fall off. She didn't even put much strength behind it, but the door broke in half regardless. She saw Lady Albedo and Lord Ainz standing on the other side when the door crashed to the floor. She was about to apologize, but she noticed two things that stopped her immediately. First, Lady Albedo and Lord Ainz were doing little to hide their laughter. It looked as if they might start rolling on the ground at any moment. Second, she noticed that everything in the room was destroyed. The walls had holes in them, and cracks ran up and down the walls. The tables, chairs, and couches in the room were in pieces, and the bed looked like it exploded as splinters of gold were strewn about the place. Pest. Pestonia, you have magic too. Ainz really is trying to get his point across, but the look on all their faces has him wanting to roll on the floor in laughter. Even Albedo is having trouble holding back. He's heard her giggle a few times, but she is straight up belly laughing. It took him much longer to compose himself than it should have before he asked, "You have a magic to repair this furniture, correct?" "I do, Your Majesty." "Good. While you are doing that, Oriel has a gate ready for everyone else to replace the furniture. Leave the space for the bed open. I'll create that with my magic when I return." "As you command, Lord Ainz." Ainz grabbed Albedo's hand and headed for the door, while everyone else started to get to work. Ainz did notice someone was missing from his side, though. Narbril Gamma. Ainz continues when she turns to him. "Come, they can handle this. Oriel will send those back to Nazarick who need it when they are finished, and a Hanzo is staying to guard increment and decrement until they join us again." Narbril fell into line behind Lord Ainz and Lady Albedo. She was confused about why Lord Ainz was leading them this way, and it only grew from there. Lord Ainz had only walked to the next door, Narbril's door, before he stopped. He put his hand on the knob and turned to Narbril. "At the feast, you will be attending as a representative of Nazarick, not a servant. Your interactions with humans have come a very long way. We plan on having someone from Nazarick represent us in every part of our kingdom. Solution shall be the one to represent us in the Baharuth Empire. I want you, Narbril, to get some practice because we plan on doing the same to you in the future." "I am honored by your faith in me, Lord Ainz." "Well, let us see how true that is when you find out what comes with preparing to be a representative of Nazarick." Ainz couldn't hold back a little chuckle. "Instead of your normal preparations, you shall be preparing with Albedo. That means not only going over reports on those who will attend, but also what you will be wearing." Ainz opens the door and motions for Albedo and Narbril to enter. When Narbril steps inside, she quickly figures out what Lord Ainz just meant. Claire is standing in Narbril's room with all of her equipment spread out all over the place. That stupid grin Narbril somehow loves is on her face, and she looks ready to burst from excitement. Narbril would need to find someone to help her keep track of the number of times Claire begged Narbril to come to see her. This was no doubt one of the girl's greatest wishes coming true. Claire confirmed her suspicions just moments after Narbrel laid eyes on her. Finally, I've dreamed of this day for so long. I promise you won't regret it. I didn't really have. Narbrel simply stopped talking when she realized what she was about to say. It would not look good on her to question Lord Ainz' orders. Perhaps it would have the added benefit of Claire not asking her 5 times a day anymore as well. Claire. The pink-haired girl turned her head to listen to Lord Ainz' instructions. Go ahead and get started with Narbrel. I will be back to escort them both when you have finished. As you wish, Lord Ainz. Claire didn't give Narbrel a moment to say anything. She grabbed Narbrel by the wrist and dragged her toward her stations. One day Narbrel would have to figure out how Claire managed to manhandle her like that, but today wasn't that day. Ainz watched in amusement as Claire dragged Narbrel away. He knew Claire's list of people she wished to make over was now down to one name, CZ Delta. Ainz wasn't sure when he would be able to get CZ into Claire's clutches, but he was sure he would eventually. I have some people I need to talk to before this dinner, love. You have a good time with Narbrel and Claire. I'll be back later to get you for dinner. Ainz went to give her a quick kiss goodbye, but Albedo was having none of that. Albedo always was reserved in her affections for Ainz when they were out in public or in other nations as representatives. Ainz knew it was a mixture of still being a bit shy about public displays of affection and what she thought was being respectful to Taylar and Albedo. Ainz got none of that right now. She attacked his mouth with her lips and tongue so quickly, Ainz didn't react at first. Albedo even kept the kiss up for a few minutes. Ainz savored it for much longer than he thought he would. Albedo was becoming a fantastic kisser, and he didn't open his eyes until he felt fingertips on his jaw. Ainz opened his eyes to see Albedo run her fingers down his jaw, ever so gently. The look of love in her eyes was on full display for Ainz, but he noticed the mischievous twinkle to them as well. He went to open his mouth to ask what it was about, but Albedo shoved him lightly on the chest, forcing him to step out into the hall. When you come back, my love, you'll get to see what you get to unwrap me from later tonight. Albedo winked at him after she said that and shut the door right in his face. Ainz couldn't do anything but chuckle and head toward his first stop. He really couldn't wait to see what Claire and she picked for Albedo to wear. He had a good idea it would be green, white, or gold, but that was the only thing he was fairly certain would be on her. The rest of his walk was spent imagining different dresses in those colors on Albedo, and not the stairs as he exited the Imperial Palace and headed toward his destination. Before he knew it, he was at his destination. The guards at the door Ainz expected. However, it did not look as though they expected him. Ainz wasn't sure if it was simply because he was there. It looked like he had no guards, or they weren't quite sure how to address him. Finally, they both balled their right hands into fists, placed them over their hearts, and gave a bow to Ainz before one of them said, "Your Majesty, how may we be of service to you?" "I wish to speak to Fluttu Paradine. Is he in?" The guard seemed to pick up on the fact he never introduced himself, and did just that. "It is Richard, Your Majesty. Master Flutter is in. I shall announce your arrival to him." Before that, Ainz spoke up before the man could even move. "Are you a knight?" "I am Your Majesty. All who guard Master Flutter are knights." Interesting. To Richard, it looked as if the king was contemplating something and finally decided to ask when he said, "I sense magic coming from you, though. Are you a mage who learned the sword? All the knights I've met who know martial arts do not give off any magic. Why are you different?" "I am not a martial artist, Your Majesty, but I am not a mage either. They call me a magical swordsman. I know magic as a mage would, but I cannot learn spells from research as a mage normally would, Your Majesty." "So, when you level up, you simply know all your spells when that happens?" The man looked shocked that Ainz knew that before he told him, but it was pretty obvious what class this man was. If he learned his spells like that, he had to be a sorcerer. That is exactly how they learn their spells. Judging from this particular man, though, Ainz thought he might be a very specific class of sorcerer he saw very few people play. Yes, Your Majesty. Also, all the spells I have ever learned, aside from one, are personal spells that enhance my physical abilities or attacks. I have never learned any spells such as Fireball or any other form of attack or healing magic. Oh, what was this one spell that wasn't personal? A few months ago, I learned 3 new spells, Your Majesty. One of them is my first attack. It is called Dispelling Strike. I cast it on my weapon before hitting someone. It doesn't do any physical damage, but it dispels any magical buffs someone has used on themselves and even works on whatever equipment they are wearing. Wow, that is impressive. Does it dispel them permanently? No, Your Majesty. It suppresses their function for 24 hours. That is very unique. I've met a lot of martial artists in my time here now, and I've never heard of an ability like that. I suppose you aren't really a martial artist, though, so it isn't the same. I am not, Your Majesty. Ainz chuckled before looking at the man. He looked to be in his mid-20s if Ainz had to guess. He got a wonderful idea if the man had the experience for it. Have you always been one of Flutter Paradine's guards, Richard? I have only been at this post for a little under a year, Your Majesty. I served in the 6th Imperial Legion for 8 years before being reassigned to this post. Do you have any experience leading or teaching? I was lead centurion of 1,000 men my last 3 years in the 6th Imperial Legion, Your Majesty. Good to hear. I mean no offense when I ask these next questions as they are personal, but what is your monthly salary, and do you happen to have a family? Richard was a little taken aback at the questions. This conversation had already caught him off guard to begin with. He would have never thought a king, let alone one who could be so terrifying, would be talking to him. Now, it seemed as though this king had gone from getting to know why he could sense magic coming from him to a job interview like he had to go through to get the post he currently had. No offense taken, Your Majesty. All knights of Master Flutter are paid the same except our commander, so we all make the same 20 gold per month. As for my family, I have a wife, twin 5-year-old sons, and a 2-year-old daughter who is almost 3, Your Majesty. I would have guessed 15 gold a month. You really do make a good living guarding Flutter. Ainz couldn't hold back the chuckle. The Psycho Kingdom is opening an academy unlike any other in this world. The schools of this world focus on a specific discipline such as magic or knighthood or adventurers, even if the Adventurers Guild is nothing like a school. Ainz can see he not only has this man Richard's attention, but also the other guard present outside of Flutton's office. This ended up being a small bonus, as now the man can spread the word quicker after he hears all this. Our academy will be for anyone who wishes to learn any of these disciplines. It matters not to us if the students are seeking to become adventurers or members of our military. That means we will need instructors of all disciplines, and when a man or woman possesses unique skills with the experience of leading and training men already, well, I can't pass up this opportunity to at least make an offer. Your Majesty? Richard seemed to get where this was going, but was too stunned to actually say much of anything. Ainz half smiled at the man before making his offer. So here is what I am offering you, Richard. I'll increase your salary from 20 gold a month to 75 and allow you, your wife, and your children to choose any home in Karn that is currently unoccupied. It will be deeded to you and passed down to your family as long as they wish to stay. All I ask is that you become an instructor to those that would suit your talents, and if you happen to rise from an instructor to something else, we can discuss further compensation. So, what do you say? Your Majesty, Actually, Richard honestly didn't have an answer, but Ainz stopped him before he could think of what to say anyway. I learned very quickly that you do not make life-altering decisions without talking to your wife about it. Go to your commander and have him send a replacement for you. I want you to head home and talk to your wife about it. You may bring me your decision whenever you have it. Ainz gave the man a nod so he could leave and think about it, but he came up with a decent idea, so he turned back to Richard before he could take his leave. Ainz reached into his robes, pulled out a card, and handed it to the man. Take this with you, and take your wife shopping for a dress for the feast tonight. I will have you both as my guests, and if your wife has questions, I will be able to answer any she has while I'm here. Just hand the shopkeeper this card and tell her to bill it to the palace. The Psycho Kingdom will make sure she is paid. I thank you, Your Majesty. We will see you tonight. Richard finally took his leave, and the other guard took over to announce his arrival to Flutter. The man didn't even get to finish introducing his arrival before he heard Flood yell at the man. Don't just leave the god of magic standing in the hall, you bouffon. Let him in. The guard opened the door once more and looked at the ground as Ainz walked in. Ainz wasn't sure why the man looked ashamed. There was no reason for that. Your guard was just doing his duty, Flood of Paradine. There is no need to reprimand him. You have excellent men charged with your protection. As you say, Your Divine Majesty. Flood had assumed his normal pose even before the guard had left and shut the door. Ainz supposed it didn't matter much anymore how Flutter acted toward him. He served his purpose in the Baharuth Empire, and it was now theirs to control. The man could grovel and cry on his hands and knees as much as he wanted. Ainz told the man to stand and sat down in one of the chairs before starting. Now that the Baharuth Empire is our vassal, there is no more need for you to be here, Flutter. The man looked beyond elated, but Ainz had no doubt some of that would go away in a moment. With that being said, we are opening an academy in Karn. It will consist of mages, knights, healers, scouts, thieves, druids, and anyone else who wishes to learn their craft and test themselves against true enemies so they may grow more powerful. The smile on Flutter's face was still there, but Ainz could see it dimmed a bit. The man probably already figured out where Ainz was going with this. We are going to assign you to be in charge of the entire academy in regards to magical education. Eventually, you will need to teach as well, but that will not be for a few years, more than likely. There is no reason for you to teach beginners, so until their skills are refined, other teachers will do. Ainz could see that made Flood a bit happier, and he was sure what he said next will add to it as well. So, you may continue to learn in the library of Ashurbanipal the books we know you can handle as of right now. You will only need to make sure the place is running smoothly and stop by every once in a while for the start of this academy. You may still devote most of your time to research. Will you accept this new assignment, Flutter Paradine? As if you have a choice or would say no anyway. Of course, Your Divine Majesty. I shall serve you as best as this human body allows me to. Ainz's thoughts were confirmed instantly by Flutter. He knew the man wouldn't say no, but gave everyone the option anyway. He was truly waiting for the day someone declined. It would be a wonderful day. Good. I have more people I need to speak with before the feast. You may begin packing any belongings you wish to bring, as you will be coming back with us to Karn when this trip has ended. I will get right on it. Your Divine Majesty. Flutter wasn't kidding. He bowed quickly and ran faster than Ainz thought the old man could out the door. Even the guards standing outside were surprised at the speed of Flutter. They hadn't even caught up to him the last he saw of Flutter. Ainz chuckled and headed toward his next stop. He needed to go here, and it wasn't the first time he'd been there. No one inside would know that since no one knew he was Mammon, but he easily found the place again. The Adventurers Guild in the Baharuth Empire was still much nicer than the one in Irantal. You would figure that not only would guild buildings have a universal design, but since the Baharuth Empire sent out its troops to deal with most monsters that they wouldn't have such a nice building. It was still nice though, but it was true it wasn't used as much. The last time Ainz was here, he believes he saw 2 other adventure parties, and that was it. He knew he wouldn't have to waste much time here, and thankfully, he wouldn't have to give a speech here as well. Ainz walked right in the door, up to the receptionist, who looked terrified he was in there, and handed her the parchments to hang on the wall. He quite literally only needed to say the words, "Hang these for people to read," and then left. It was the best visit he ever had anywhere. As Ainz stepped back out into the street, he turned and started walking the only place left to really see, the Central Market. He knew nothing was happening in the Grand Arena today. He wasn't sure the reaction he'd get walking into the temple of the four great gods, so he avoided that as well. He did notice the people staring, but he was getting used to it. He only ever really saw two expressions on people's faces whenever they looked at him: fear or awe. There really wasn't a middle ground that he had noticed. Once he finally did reach the central market, almost everyone stopped and watched him walk around. Even the merchants selling their wares were struck mute. Ainz walked around a bit so everyone would see him and even bought a few things he didn't see the first time. It was the only way he got anyone to talk while he was in the central market. He didn't linger nearly as long as he would have liked because it looked like business came to a halt while he was there. He quickly made his way back to the palace. The feast would be soon, and it was time to pick up Albedo and Narbrol. He was certainly excited to see what Albedo decided to wear, Narbrol as well. Anytime Ainz got to see anyone from Nazarick in anything other than their normal attire, he took it. The women of Nazarick all looked stunning in their normal attire, even the maids, but there was something about seeing them in dresses and normal clothes that Ainz loved. He was starting to get to see it much more often nowadays. Not only were they attending functions like this feast more often now, but a number of the women of Nazarick had taken a liking to fashion as well. Ainz had no doubt it was in no small part because of Taylar and Albedo. Not only did Taylar possesses an unnatural amount of dresses, cosmetics, but Albedo was also incredible with a needle. She created plenty of her own clothes the woman of Nazarick would gossip about on a regular basis. Ever since the night Albedo wore that little white dress, she had put much more effort into what she wore on their date nights. A few of those times, Ainz had taken her before she could even leave the room. She looked so delicious. Two of those times, Albedo had to find something new to wear because Ainz had ripped her outfit in half. Once she found out about this ambassador role, she seemed to get more into formal dresses and outfits, but it took nothing away from how ridiculously sexy she looked. He found it exceedingly difficult to hold conversations or pay attention to much of anything but her when she filled this role with him. In Rieste eyes, he doesn't remember speaking to a single person who wasn't Taylar, Albedo, or Albedo the entire night at that feast until he almost choked that Asclown Philip to death. He only noticed the man because he couldn't keep his eyes off Albedo that night either. A half smile spread across his face as he remembered her in that green dress she wore that night. She really did have a thing for green, white, and gold. He obviously thought for too much about what she'd be wearing, and he was standing in front of the door knocking before he even realized it. When the door opened, he was left speechless immediately. However, it was not Albedo who was standing before Ainz. It was Narbrol Gamma, and unholy fucking hells, did she look stunning. Her hair was not in her signature ponytail. Instead, it was all free and looked to be layered. There were slight waves to her hair, and it looked to Ainz as if some of the layers of her hair had been highlighted a dark blue by Claire. Her normal bangs were also gone, but the way Claire parted her hair, it still gave the same perfect frame of her face her bangs normally did. Ainz couldn't believe Claire talked Narbrol into makeup either, even if the little bit she had on was very light. There were only two really noticeable areas of makeup on Narbrol. Her eyes obviously had eyeliner on them, but it was only a bit to highlight. The big difference was the lipstick she was wearing. Normally, every woman he saw use lipstick around him went with pink or red. It seemed to be the universal, I want to look sexy colors, but the color Narbrol was wearing was very different and fit her look to perfection. Instead of the pink or red, Narbrol had on a dark blue lipstick. It went perfectly with her highlights, dark blue sapphire earrings hanging from silver chains on her ears, and her dress. Her dress was a dark blue silk. It had a see-through black fabric that ran over the top of it as well. It made her dress look dark blue, but it changed to black and back to blue as she moved in it. The dress was held up in the front by a black strap that went around the back of her neck and connected at the top of her chest. There was a small opening to show a tiny bit of cleavage, and it was highlighted with embedded diamonds. The blue silk was tight around her chest, stomach, and top of her hips, but it flared out after that. The silk was very loose and free-flowing below that. It didn't quite reach the floor, and Ainz could see the black shoes with the dark blue heel peeking out. Nishi's daughter. Nishi's daughter. Nishi's daughter. Narbril opened the door to meet Lord Ainz and was frozen by the look he was giving her. Lord Ainz had never looked at her like he was now, and it was confusing. She knew she had to step out, though, and when she got close, she could have sworn she heard him muttering to himself. Nishi's daughter. Before she could make certain, though, Albedo stepped out, and he stopped talking. Narbril was pretty certain he wasn't breathing either. She understood, though. She'd always wished she was as pretty as someone like Lupus Regina, but even she was surprised how much different Albedo looked when she got dressed up. Ainz didn't think he'd be able to think of anything but remembering he could not talk to Taylar about Nishi's daughter until Albedo stepped out. The woman somehow got more beautiful by the second to Ainz. Ironically, Albedo's hair was done somewhat similar to the way Narbril usually wears it. It was fitting considering Narbril had her hair as Albedo's normally looked. The difference, the hair pulled back in the ponytail, was very curly. Albedo had a lot thicker hair than Narbril did, so there were quite a bit of curls hanging back there. Albedo even had the 2 strands of hair framing her face falling in front of her. Albedo had on no eyeliner or no eyeshadow. The only thing that adorned her flawless face was her lipstick, and Ainz was mesmerized by the color. It was black, and he had never seen any in Nazarick wear it. Everything about Albedo was so bright and radiant. It was a shock to the senses to see the dark black on her lips, but my God, did it fit her perfectly. It contrasted with her eyes, hair, and glowing skin perfectly, and even set off her dress. When Ainz finally laid his eyes on what Albedo was wearing, he scanned her body so slow to take her all in. He was sure they would be late by the time he was done looking at her. Her dress was a light blue color that reminded him of the sky. It was the complete opposite end of the blue spectrum from Narbril's dress. There was a single thick strip of fabric that started above her right breast that went up across her left shoulder. It continued across her back and attached back at the dress on her right hip. It was no doubt to keep the dress from sliding down, but he honestly didn't see how that was possible. Ainz was almost certain this dress was as tight as the little white one he loved her, and so he didn't see it moving anywhere unless it was unzipped or ripped off. The fabric continued down to below her knees, and it was still very clingy. However, there was a large slit that ran up Albedo's left leg that went from her knee all the way up to above mid-thigh. Ainz went to look at her shoes, but noticed she was wearing one piece of jewelry. The ring he had given her earlier in the day, and she was definitely not hiding it. She would normally stand there with her hands at her side when came to get her, but she had that hand flat and right in front of her for anyone to see the ring she was wearing. When he finally did manage to look down, he saw her in black heels that he was surprised even she could walk in. They had to be 5 or 6 inches by his guess, and they made her already delicious legs look irresistible. I have no idea how I'm going to make it through this feast. If trying to remind himself that Nishi's daughter was off limits wasn't going to be hard enough, he had no idea how he'd make it through hours and hours at this feast without ripping Albedo's dress off or teleporting her somewhere away from everyone else. Ainz was sure he stared at them for another few minutes before he even realized he hadn't said anything since he arrived. He should be used to this by now, but the women of Nazarick were so damn beautiful. He still stared at them like a horny teenager more than he should. Narbril Gamma, you look stunning. Ainz picked up her hand and kissed the back of it. He was already crossing the line thinking about what she looked like out of that dress, so he definitely needed to keep the rest of it tame. Albedo, on the other hand, he pressed his lips to hers the moment he stepped in front of her and his hands were all over her. Every time he saw her dress up, he thanked whoever was responsible for Albedo always picking outfits that were perfectly fitted to her form. I hope this is easy to remove. You'll find it in shreds later if it takes longer than a second to peel this off of you, my love. Ainz got the response he was hoping for when he whispered that in Albedo's ear. He watched her shudder and the goosebumps rise on her neck, and he couldn't have been happier. The look in her eyes said she wanted him to rip it off now, but that would have to wait for later, as much as he didn't want it to. He extended an elbow for each of them to take. Albedo latched onto his right arm instantly, but Narbral Gamma looked hesitant to do the same. He hoped he didn't embarrass her earlier, but the light dusting of pink on her cheeks made him think that is exactly what he did. Eventually, she did take his left arm, but she turned about 5 shades of red darker and looked at the ground when she did. Ainz thought maybe he shouldn't have complimented Narbral a second ago, but he had to. She did look stunning even if she was embarrassed by it. She was only like that for a few moments though. Ainz heard her take a deep breath, then pick her head back up to walk proper. She still had that light dusting of pink, but she looked completely composed after only walking about 50 feet down the hall. They made it to the doors without interruption after that, with increment and decrement trailing behind them. Both of Ainz's guests were waiting for him, and he took a moment to greet them before the master of ceremonies could announce their arrival. "Richard, it is good to see you made it. It is an honor to be your guest tonight, Your Majesty." Ainz shakes the man's hand, then turns to his wife. It was not hard to tell that Richard was a lucky man in the Baharuth Empire. His wife had wavy, black hair and brilliant blue eyes. The dress she picked was somewhat matching Albedo and Narbral, ironically. It had 2 straps that came over her shoulders that held the dress up for her. It covered enough of her breasts to remain quite modest, but showed off the littlest bit of cleavage at the top. It fit her body loosely, but just enough for the fabric to be able to move. The dress flared out at the hips, and the silk pooled down to the floor. The bottom of her dress was a dark blue color, almost an exact match to Narbral's, but the higher up the dress you went, the lighter the blue was until it almost perfectly matched Albedo's. Ainz picked up her hand and kissed the back of it as any proper gentleman would. "You must be Emma. It is a pleasure to meet you, my lady." "The pleasure is mine, Your Majesty. Thank you for inviting us to dine as your guests tonight and allowing us to buy something for such an occasion. I hope we are proper guests tonight and live up to the invitation to such a feast." "Think nothing of it, my lady. I'm already happy you have come as my guests." Ainz chuckles before he slaps Richard on the shoulder. "I want to know how this one ended up snatching you up. You're beautiful, well-spoken, and have a good fashion sense. How did you end up with this guy?" "I did not make it easy on him, Your Majesty." Emma giggles at Richard's scowl. "I made him chase me for 3 years before I gave in. The man was persistent, so I eventually gave in to that pretty face of his." "Another good thing in your favor, Richard." The man looked perplexed at Ainz's statement, so Ainz clarified it for him. "It seems you don't give up." Ainz chuckles before he remembers he forgot to do something. "Where are my manners?" "Richard, Emma, this is Ambassador Albedo of the Psycho Kingdom." Ainz watches Emma pinch Richard as his jaw falls down, finally laying eyes on Albedo. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Ambassador Albedo." Both Emma and Richard greet her at the same time. Richard lays a kiss on the back of her hand, and Emma shakes it. Ainz can tell he likes Richard for some reason. Normally, he would have cut off that hand and those lips for doing that. Ainz motions to his left after they greet Albedo. "This is Narbral Gamma, one of our foreign liaisons of the Psycho Kingdom." It doesn't matter if they had just met Albedo, Richard can't stop his jaw from dropping again. He kind of felt bad when he saw Emma pinch him again, but he couldn't fault the man. Narbral looked incredible dressed up like this. Emma and Richard greet her the same way they greeted Albedo, and now that just left too. The pair behind us are Increment and Decrement, 2 of the outstanding maids of Nazarick. Both the maids blush at the praise and nod their heads in acknowledgement of Ainz's guests. After that, Ainz heard the master of ceremonies bang his staff on the floor for silence. The man took no time in announcing them once it had quieted down. "Our guests of honor for the evening, His Majesty, the exalted king of the Psycho Kingdom, Ainz Olgown. Accompanying His Majesty tonight is head ambassador of the Psycho Kingdom, Lady Albedo, and foreign liaison, Lady Narbral Gamma, as well as their servants for the night, Increment and Decrement, and His Majesty's guests for the evening, Sir Richard Mardant and his wife, Emma Mardant." When the doors opened and Ainz stepped in with everyone, the gasps were so loud, Ainz felt the air shift. He had no doubt it was due to the two women on his arms right now. If he was being honest, Emma was helping that image as well. She certainly wasn't as beautiful as the women from Nazareth, but as Ainz scanned the room, he honestly couldn't spot a woman from the Baharuth Empire that looked as beautiful as Richard's wife did tonight. Ainz also noticed all the nobles were here tonight, not that it was many. Unlike the Riestai's kingdom's feast that had more nobles than he cared to count, there were only 5 noble families remaining in the Baharuth Empire. Jerkniv had all the other ones killed, exiled, or stripped of their titles already. There was a hell of a lot more people than just 5 at this feast, though. There were just as many, if not more, people at this feast as the one in Riestai's. The difference is that almost everyone in here from the Baharuth Empire was from some branch of the military or the Imperial Magic Academy. The Riestai's kingdom had nothing but nobles. It certainly didn't work like that here. The first part of the feast was simply the reason for said luck was none other than Albedo and Narble Gamma. Apparently, Narble was taking this very seriously because she followed Albedo around like a puppy listening to everything she said. Ainz even saw Narble joining in on the discussions occasionally. She looked like she was even attempting to smile and be polite to others. While she had come a long way, he wasn't expecting that at all. This gave him the time to speak with Emma and answer any questions she had. Honestly, the woman didn't have many. It only took about 5 minutes talking with her to ease her mind and have them agree to move to Karn. The look on Emma's face when he asked if she was alright living beside elves, goblins, ogres, undead, lizard men, catfolk, toad men, etc. was priceless though. He knew she'd get used to it pretty quickly from her reaction, so he was not worried about it. It was pretty mundane conversation from then on with them. He told them about Karn, how it was laid out, and told them they'd have time to settle as the academy hadn't been constructed yet. When it was finally time for the meal, Ainz saw Albedo and Narble making their way back toward the table. It looked to Ainz as if they had charmed every person in attendance already. That would make all of this very easy. When they brought out the first course, Ainz was mildly impressed with the dish, but there was something he didn't like about his dish in particular. Of course, he couldn't let it slide, so he stopped his server before he could go anywhere. "Perhaps you could get me another plate, sir?" Ainz asked it like a question for some fun. He wanted to see the man's reaction to him more than almost anything else. "Is there a problem with that one?" "Your Majesty." Ainz went to open his mouth to reply, but Albedo, Narble, Increment, and Decrement all beat him to saying anything. They did not seem happy the man left off that last part. He wanted to chuckle, but he'd just make them understand why the man didn't say that. "It's all right, you 4. I'm not his king. Am I, sir?" All 4 of them went to speak before the man could, but Ainz stopped them with a raise of his hand. He was having fun, and everyone was paying attention to his conversation now. It didn't look like the man was going to answer, so Ainz set the plate down, took a piece of meat off of it, and swallowed it down quickly. When he saw the man smile, he knew he'd get his answer. "You will never be our king. And now, I get the privilege of knowing I was the one to kill you, monster." The man went to turn and run, but before he could, someone said, "Hold species." He was still staring in the eyes of Ainz old gown. He couldn't move, but he was glad he was going to get to watch the monster take his last breath. He did wonder why it hadn't worked yet. Then, a burst of loud laughter went up, and he was stunned to see Ainz old gown laughing right in his face. "Did you honestly believe you could kill me with poison?" Ainz had to chuckle again. "You could have at least tried a stronger poison. I mean, God's Bane is pretty weak stuff. You should learn your enemy's strengths and weaknesses before trying to off them." Ainz heard everyone gasp when he revealed the poison. Apparently, everyone knew of poison in this world, or at least that particular poison. Ainz didn't see the big deal. God's Bane was only slightly above a mid-tier poison. What Ainz didn't know is that God's Bane was the rarest, most expensive, and most deadly poison in this world. If it even touched your skin while handling it, you would die within 10 seconds. Your Majesty, I swear dash. Jerkniv jumped up quickly and wanted to say he didn't know, but he didn't have to. Ainz silenced him with a raised hand, and the man stopped speaking immediately. Yes, I know, Governor. You should have, though, because it happened in the country you're responsible for. I'll let you off with a warning this time. Jerkniv visibly relaxes after Ainz said that. I suppose dinner will have to wait for everyone since this seems like an opportune moment to dispense some justice. Hanzo Black. I am at your command, Your Majesty. Please bring the 2 prisoners from the dungeon up here for their sentencing. It is better to do this all at once. I'm sure the people here won't mind waiting a little longer to eat. It won't take long for their judgments. As you will it, Your Majesty. The Hanzo disappeared, and Ainz finally looked somewhere in the room other than the few people he just spoke to. Most of them looked shocked or terrified. It was hard to tell the difference with this lot. Albedo, Narbril, Increment, and Decrement, on the other hand, hadn't looked anywhere but at the man being held in front of them. He was surprised Albedo hadn't crushed the man with her aura yet. Ainz could even see Narbril twitching. That is how bad she is holding herself back. Luckily, the Hanzo didn't take long to bring the 2 from the dungeon, and they were on their knees in front of him while the server was still paralyzed in place. Ainz got up from his seat, touched Albedo on the shoulder as he passed to get her to follow, opened the balcony doors, much to everyone's wonder, and finally stood in front of the 3 men with Albedo at his side. Now, Lord Baron. Ainz points to the man on the far right. You tried to keep your slaves when I ordered all of them free. While that is a crime, its punishment varies. As such, I was told you didn't treat your slave good, but you weren't cruel either. For that, you shall get a lighter sentence than your friend next to you. Ainz motions for Albedo, and she walks toward the man. She grabs him by the throat and picks him up as if she was grabbing a feather. It is astonishing to almost everyone in the room, but what Ainz says next has them almost scratching their heads. You shall be thrown out of this city for your crimes against me and your former slaves. Albedo here is going to give you a hand leaving. It is up to you to get the rest of the way yourself. The moment Ainz finished, Albedo stepped around the table toward the balcony doors. Everyone was wondering what she was doing, but they got their answer quickly. Once Albedo was a step away from exiting onto the balcony, she cocked her arm back, launched it forward, and let go of Lord Baron's throat. Almost everyone's jaw dropped immediately as Lord Baron went flying into the sky at a speed none thought possible. The man was going so fast, he was a speck then completely out of view for everyone except a select few, those from Nazarick. They turned their stunned expression from the sky to Albedo, but didn't look at her long as Ainz cut through the silence. Now, time to deal with you, Lord Doran. Ainz can see and smell the man piss himself in front of everyone. You also failed to release your slaves, but unlike the former Lord Baron, you were not so kind to your slaves. I have heard you like to rape the women slaves you have, barely fed them, and sometimes killed them when you're bored. Your punishment shall be much more severe. It is Ainz's turn to reach down and grab a man by the throat. However, Ainz doesn't move anywhere. He is holding the man a couple of feet off the ground because of their height difference. Everyone is wondering what he is about to do, but they don't wait long as they hear Ainz say, "Create Death Knight." A black liquid seems to flow from Ainz's hand onto the man he is holding up. The liquid starts to overtake the man's body, and it isn't long before his gurgles are a thing of the past, and he is covered head to toe in the black liquid. Ainz releases the man, and he hits the ground looking like nothing more than a black puddle. The puddle continues to move, though, and a form takes shape from it. Everyone witnesses a towering incarnation of death rise from the puddle and immediately bow to Ainz. Ainz turns to the slain theocracy assassin and smirks at him. He can see the man has lost control of all of his bodily functions. Don't worry, my friend. Ainz's grin grows even larger. Your punishment will be much, much worse than his. Death Knight, The giant takes a few steps toward Ainz. Please carry this criminal for me. I'm not touching a man who just shit and pissed himself. The Death Knight immediately complies by throwing the man over his shoulder and waiting for his next command. Ainz turns toward everyone else to address them. He made sure to start with a certain couple first. Sorry dinner turned out so bad, Richard, Emma. I shall have my carriage take you home. They will help you pack anything you want to bring with you, and I shall see you in Karn in a couple of days. Ainz turns to address the rest of the party. I think I've had enough of the Baharuth Empire's hospitality. He turns to Jerknev. I'll be sending our foreign liaison soon. She will check up on you from time to time. Her name is Solution Epsilon. Believe me, you'll know who she is. Asterisk gata asterisk. Ainz opens a gate and motions for everyone to step through. This was a fantastic excuse to leave this place and not have to spend the next 3 days here. He really should send a thank you basket to the slain theocracy for this one. Taylar and Albedo were in the throne room speaking with a good amount of the residents of Nazareth. A few were accompanying Taylar to Karn in 2 days to welcome Blue Rose, give them a little tour, and introduce them to the only other adventurer team that was currently making Karn their home. Taylar had only gotten to tell Lupus Regina and Intoma that they would be coming with her before a gate opened right in front of the throne. Taylar looked at Oriole. She would have had to allow it to happen, and her daughter just gave her a smile and a thumbs up. It didn't take long to figure out why, as Increment and Decrement stepped through the gate. Taylar knew this shouldn't be happening, and it continued to get more curious. A Death Knight stepped through next with a man on his shoulder. Everyone figured the surprises were over, and they couldn't have been more wrong. Narbril Gamma stepped through next, and the entire room went silent and stared at her. No one else truly noticed Albedo or Ainz step through as they were all focused on Narbril. The only ones who had seen Narbril dressed up like this had stepped through the portal with her. Narbril noticed all the eyes on her after a few seconds. She had no time to think of a reaction because her body did it for her. She blushed and looked at the ground. This caused one of the people in the room to giggle and yell out, "Narbril, you look like a princess." A few people, including Narbril, looked to the left of Taylar and saw Lupus Regina jumping up and down. She was no doubt the one that yelled that out. Narbril turned a darker shade of red when she heard Ainz say, "I agree, Lupus Regina." Narbril looked back at the ground and started fidgeting with her hands in her dress. She did like being called pretty, but all the eyes on her were starting to unnerve her. She was not used to this. She felt someone touch her elbow and looked up to see Lord Ainz. Probably not the person to see right now after what he said. Narbril went to look down again, and Ainz didn't stop her, but he did ask, "Do you want to go change?" There was no way she could look up and answer him after that. He asked it very low so no one could hear him, and he sounded worried. Narbril had no idea what to think about that. All she could do was nod her head. Ainz went to Cascade, but someone yelled out and stopped him. "Wait." Ainz sees Lupus Regina take one step, leap, slide on her knees, and stop just before Ainz. He saw her clasping her hands tightly in front of her, and Lupus Regina was giving him the best puppy dog eyes she could manage. "Please, Lord Ainz, I'll never ask for anything again if you take a picture of Narbril like this and put it in the frame next to my bed." Taylar and Albedo giggled. Ainz chuckled. Narbril glared at Lupus Regina. Everyone else didn't know how to respond and simply stared at the exchange. Ainz finally said, "That's up to Narbril." If the decision was up to her, Narbril already knew the answer. She looked right at Lupus Regina on the ground and finally spoke for the first time since coming through. "No." Everyone laughed this time, and Ainz opened a gate for Narbril to step through. They got everyone to settle after a bit, and Ainz, Albedo, Decrement, and Increment joined the meeting. Taylar thought she'd be going alone to Karn, but Ainz told her about his new residents coming so she'd have some company. Taylar had no complaints about that. Not only did she not have to miss him for 3 days in the Baharuth Empire, but Ainz would also be with her all day tomorrow and with her in Karn. They also did not have to wait for Ainz to return to do their last construction in Karn. They were supposed to do it after he came back, but there was no need to wait now. They could knock out Greeting Blue Rose, Flutter, Richard and his family, and create the last building Karn would need for quite some time. Taylar then shared the only other news that had any sort of relevance. Gazef Stronov had accepted his new position and title from Queen Reagent Renner. Now, he was Lord or General Stronov, depending on the situation. Ainz seemed pleased, but a few of those from Nazarick didn't look the same. It wasn't a surprise, it was everyone who was there when Gazef and Ainz dueled. None were happy with the former warrior captain that day. While only a few had a look of displeasure at the news of Gazef, the entire throne room soon had the same look as Ainz told them of what transpired in the Baharuth Empire. Not surprisingly, Taylar was the angriest of them all. There was no one in all of Nazarick or the New World who hated the slain theocracy more than his angelic queen. Once he relayed all that had happened, and everyone knew why that man was on the Death Knight's shoulder, he had the entirety of the throne room volunteer to keep the man company with Neuronist. Honestly, the man served no purpose, as Ainz knew he couldn't tell them anything they already didn't know. That, however, didn't matter to anyone in this room. Ainz would-be assassin would be getting very familiar with the denizens of Nazarick over the next couple of months before Ainz showed him a sliver of mercy and turned him into an undead of his choosing. The meeting broke up shortly after that, and everyone went back to their duties. For Ainz, that meant taking Albedo back to her room. Albedo was a bit surprised at this. She assumed Ainz would be spending the night with Taylar and Albedo. Ainz banished those thoughts and made goosebumps rise all over her body when she voiced those thoughts, and Ainz whispered in her ear, "I've been looking forward to peeling this sexy-ass dress off you since the moment I saw you in it." Ainz didn't even give her a chance to say anything before they disappeared from the throne room and appeared outside her door. Ainz couldn't have been more grateful for that pitiful excuse of an assassination attempt. He got to spend the rest of the night wrapped up in Albedo, and the following day with Taylar and Albedo in bed with nothing to do but each other. Ainz was in an absolutely splendid mood as he stood in Karn because of those 2 days. Blue Rose, Flutter, and Richard and his family were already inside Karn and making their way to them. Ainz saw the last of the people they were waiting on to arrive and saw something he hadn't yet. The Swords of Darkness and Enri had finished their tasks and were finally making their way toward them, but that wasn't what caught his eye. As they neared, Peter kissed Enri right on the lips, and it wasn't a quick peck. Ainz had seen the man hold her hand in public, kiss the back of her hand or her cheek, but never seen him so open with his affections in public, and it looked like Enri was enjoying every second of it. Apparently, those two had grown very close since the Swords of Darkness moved to Karn from Nazarick. He noticed Peter making his way up to himself and Taylar while leaving the rest of the Swords of Darkness behind with Enri. It was strange to see Enri not immediately gravitate to Taylar's side, but it wasn't long before they figured out why. "Your Majesties." Peter bows to both of them. "I was hoping you could spare a few moments. I have something I wish to discuss with you, Your Majesties." "We have a few minutes before they arrive. Speak your mind, Peter." Taylar's words brought a smile to Peter's face, and it wasn't long before he continued. "If there is anyone in this world that Enri views as parents now that hers are gone, it is you too, Your Majesties. I was hoping that I could have your blessing to ask Enri to be my wife." Ainz's mouth opened slightly, but his jaw didn't drop. He did not see that coming. Taylar, on the other hand, clapped her hands and jumped up and down a little with a giddy giggle escaping her lips. It drew almost everyone's attention, but when Taylar spoke, it wasn't loud enough for anyone but her, Ainz, and Peter to hear. "Oh, absolutely. Can I see the ring? Did you get one already?" "No, I wanted to be sure it was all right for me to ask her, my queen. I was hoping to get leave to head to Irantal to purchase one. She is quite busy making sure all the new citizens are comfortable and feeling safe. I plan to ask her once everything calmed down a bit, Your Majesties." It was not Taylar, but Ainz who spoke next. Peter wasn't the only one surprised by what Ainz said. Even Taylar was surprised he suggested such a thing. "Nonsense." Ainz waves his hand in dismissal. You will find nothing worthy of your future wife in such a city. You will come with us back to Nazareth after we have concluded our business for the day and have the blacksmith of Nazareth craft one for you to your specifications. Are you sure, my king? Peter may have asked the question, but Ainz could see the same question in Taylar's eyes. He is pretty sure there is some shock mixed in there with her reaction as well. Absolutely. While we have had an impact on many lives, Henry and Nemu were the first ones we encountered outside of our home. As such, they have become very important to us. If Henry is to wear an engagement ring, it is only fitting it comes from Nazareth, especially considering how close she and Taylar have become. Thank you, my king. I have no idea how to repay you for such kindness, your majesties. Ainz looked over at Taylar thinking she might take this one, but she didn't, and he could tell why. Taylar and Albedo might be borderline insatiable and be driven by passion and lust, but nothing seemed to get them going like when Ainz showed them romance and sentimentality, even if it wasn't directed toward them. While Ainz was trying to remind Taylar they had guests arriving any minutes, and Taylar tried her best to get her tongue in his mouth, said guests were still staring wide-eyed out the windows of the most comfortable and luxurious carriage any had ever thought possible to exist. The moment they had crested the hill and saw Karn, they were all struck mute. Blue Rose had traveled past Karn a few times, but had never stopped. They knew exactly what the tiny farming village used to look like. Now, it looked to be at least the size of Irantal, probably a little bigger. They didn't miss that it was still expanding either and couldn't believe what their eyes landed on. The city already had 4 rings worth of walls, and a 5th was almost halfway done. The inner 3 rings looked to be a polished dark blue when the sunlight hit it and a black color when in the shade. It looked exactly as they all expected adamantite to look, but none could believe there were 3 walls that big constructed of adamantite. The 4th wall was the same color as the halfway completed 5th wall. Those 2 walls looked to be a dark purple color in the sunlight and black in the shade. No one wanted to say it, but they were pretty sure that metal was orichalcum. The thought they could even possibly be right in what metals those walls were made of made their eyes grow even more. The inner 2 rings were completely filled with white marble buildings everywhere. Many of them looked similar from this distance, but there were 2 that stood out from the others. The first was a very large, 5-story building that was made of pitch-black marble. It towered over every other building in the city except the other easily discernible building. The second building that stood out was no doubt a temple. It was the only one any of them noticed among the other buildings. Half of the temple was black, and the other half was white. It was only about 20 feet shorter than the large black building, so it stood out easily as well. As they moved through the streets, they were in for even more of a shock. When they stopped in Irantal, it was noticeable that there were other races than just humans there now. They had all spotted the occasional lizard man or goblin, not to mention the undead that patrolled the city, but Karn was something completely different. There were humans, and it was a decent amount, but they did not make up the majority of the citizens of the city. Everywhere they looked, they saw elves. There were definitely more elves than humans, but that wasn't all. The farther into the city they got, the more races they encountered. It started to get hard to keep track of the different numbers of races they came across. There were lizardmen, elves, humans, toadmen, goblins, ogres, undead, catfolk, trolls, and the list went on and on. When they were halfway into the city, Evil Eye even removed her mask without hesitation for the first time and reverently whispered, "This is like a dream." And indeed it was. No one had ever thought it was possible to see so many races in one place, and they weren't just doing it for a place to be. They could all see everyone working together. Humans waving in greeting to lizardmen and undead. Elves walking side by side with humans, holding riveting conversations. It was something to behold for all of them. When their carriages finally came to a stop, they were not expecting such a large greeting party or one comprised of so many important people. Out of all the important people of the Psycho Kingdom they had all met, it looked as if only Queen Albedo and Princess Oriole were missing. There were also quite a few people none of them had ever met. It was sure to be an interesting day by the look of it. As the two carriages came to a stop, everyone finally exited and stood in front of the large group of people. Flutter was fighting the urge to bow before his master, as he always did. Richard and his family were at a loss as to what to do at the large, important group of people who came to welcome them, and Blue Rose was in a similar state. It is Taylar who finally steps in between the two groups and speaks first. "Welcome to Karn, everyone. I thought it would be a good idea for you all to meet since you'll probably be crossing paths more often than not in the city. I thought a large group introduction would be in order, then everyone can get back to what you are needed for right now." Taylar looks around and decides it is probably best to start with the ones that almost none of them know. She motions to her right and begins the introductions. She motions to one after the other as she goes down the line. This first young woman is the mayor of this fine city, Henry Amat. Next to her is High Priestess Ashrin Kelsey's, First Ranger Tinia Vathana, and Karn's head of agriculture and resident druid, Sarah Baron. Last but not least, head alchemist and Firia Berar. All five waves at Blue Rose with a little bit of awe in their gazes. Blue Rose wasn't exactly some no-name adventurer party. All of them knew exactly who they were waving at. Blue Rose, on the other hand, was partially stunned after the first group was introduced. Not only are 3 prominent positions in this city held by elves, the mayor and head alchemist of this city were humans who looked to be no older than 16. It seemed the city had more surprises than even they could imagine. The others, who exited the carriages as well, couldn't agree more. The next group over here is the only other currently active adventure party that calls Karn its home, the Swords of Darkness. Their leader, Peter Mock, Ranger Luckrut Volve, Druid Dinewood Wonder, Arcane Caster Ninja Veyron, and the newest member of their team, also a caster, Archie B. Ryle Furt. Blue Rose had heard of the Swords of Darkness before, but what they saw in front of them did not match the former Silver Plate adventurers they heard about. Lockhews was pretty sure, and Evil Eye was certain their equipment was better than almost everything Blue Rose owned. That wasn't the only thing either. The entire party looked relaxed, and it looked as if they were enjoying themselves, but Blue Rose was perceptive. They could all tell that the Swords of Darkness would be ready to battle in an instant if it came to it. Flutter, for his part, only took his gaze off his god and goddess to look at Archie. He was glad his information on the girl had saved her life. She had a lot of potential when she was at the academy. Now he is sure his god and goddess will make use of all that potential. Richard and his family stared at the new adventure group with wide eyes. Richard got another pinch from his wife for staring at Ninja for longer than she liked, and the rest of them stared at the new adventure team with awe. None could remember ever seeing gear so splendid on an adventure before. The last little group is Head Ambassador Albedo, who I believe all of you have met. 2 members of our Pleiades, Lupus Regina Beta and Intoma Vasilisa Zeta. Everyone also knows Lena's Rock Brews. My wonderful and scary husband, Exalted King Ainz Olgown, and last but not least me, Exalted Queen Taylar Olgown, Goddess of Life, Beauty, Love, Magic, and Creation. Sure, list your goddess titles and not my god ones. Ainz grumbles and Taylar giggles at him. You have too many. I only have 5. You have like 9 or something already. If you're that upset, you do the introductions next time. Ainz grins at her, then takes her up on the offer to take over, even if she meant next time, and not this time. Everyone, this is Lockhews, Gagrin, Tia, Tina, and... Ainz whispers to Evil Eye. He nods after she whispers back and continues. Kino, the members of Blue Rose. That very old man is Flutter Paradine. He will head the magic portion of our academy. Next to him is Sir Richard Mardant. He is going to be one of our specialized instructors, his wife Emma, and their children. Ainz waits until the ridiculously large group shakes hands and exchanges greetings. Well, everyone but Henry, that girl is a hugger. Then he disperses the little greeting. All right, now that everyone has met, you may all return to your duties. I'm sure we will run into everyone thought the day. Enri, the Swords of Darkness, Ashrin, Tinia, Sara, and Firia all break from the group and head back to what they were doing while the rest walked down the street they met on. Blue Rose and Richard's family were here to choose a place to live, so they saw to that first. While it might seem like an easy choice, it really wasn't. All of the buildings, except a select few, were made of the same white marble, but they were all done in different architectural styles, so not all of them looked the same. After explaining the differences in each one, Blue Rose ended up choosing a Spanish-style manor while Richard and his wife went with a modern-style manor. Ainz thought Blue Rose's choice was interesting since he'd never seen that style in Riesteis, but Richard and Emma's wasn't too surprising. Modern-style homes were more open, so it would be easier to keep an eye on their kids. Ainz and Taylar had servants bring in their belongings while they showed them a bit more of the city. It wasn't too much walking since only a little over a third of the city was actually complete. Ainz and Taylar wished they could take a picture when they confirmed Blue Rose's suspicions on what the walls were made of. When they told them it would eventually be 3 rings of adamantite, 3 rings of orichalcum, and 3 rings of mithril, neither could contain their laughter at their faces. They finished the tour on the outside and made sure to grab the others who were present for the initial greeting on the way. That is how the whole group once again found itself together, but this time, outside the walls of Karn. Ainz spoke when the group was gathered and ready to hear his words. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering about this academy we keep speaking of. While we could use almost any building in Karn for its purposes, our academy will be much more than a simple marble building. Ainz can see everyone is listening to everything he says by the looks in their eyes, so he continues. You are about to witness the first simultaneous cast of super tier magic. While most of you will only see the finished product, 3 of you will be able to watch the entire casting of the spell from our point of view. Each one of us will choose someone to witness this magic with us, so I'll go first, Flood. Ainz motions to the maniac, and the man bounces forward like a kitten playing with a ball of yarn. Ainz truly didn't want to choose the man, but Ainz has learned so much about magic from the man. He thinks it will be very beneficial. Ninya. Archie. Taylar holds out her hand to Ninya and beckons her to come to her. Albedo does the same thing to her shared apprentice with Oriole. All 3 turn their backs to everyone else, with the chosen 3 standing in front of them. Ainz grabs both their hands, syncs their telepathic bond, and they all cast the super tier spell at the same time. Everyone on the outside simply sees large blue and white magic runes and circles encompassing all 3 of the casters. On the inside, Flutter, Archie, and Ninya have trouble keeping their jaws from opening. They watch as what can only be described as a palace is being created right in front of their eyes. Once they notice the entire structure looks complete, they hear all 3 of the casters say in unison, Super tier magic, true creation. Everyone else sees an enormous palace appear out of nowhere. It has 10 towers that make up the outside that are all connected by high stone walls. Each tower is fairly large itself, but directly in the center is a single tower that is almost 50% taller than the ones on the outside. The towers are circular, and the tops look to mimic a classic wizard hat. The entire palace is almost as large as the inner ring of Karn. Ainz and Taylar lead everyone on a quick tour, which ends up taking over 2 hours because of the size of the building before the finishing touches are applied. Lupus, Regina, and Intoma step forward once everyone is out of the building and present Ainz and Taylar with a box each. The box is nothing special that anyone can tell other than it is top-notch craftsmanship. When the Pleiades members open the boxes for Ainz and Taylar, everyone notices them now holding a silver orb in each hand. The orbs are a little larger than their fists, look completely smooth, and the only markings on them are a set of strange symbols. Now, I'm sure you all thought creating that building was impressive, but this is the truly magical part. Has anyone ever heard of a Tavkazira? Everyone shakes their head no, so Ainz gives them a bit of an explanation. A topkazira is a type of whale that flies in the sky instead of swimming in the ocean. It has a gland that secretes a gravity field that allows them to fly. Ainz holds up one of the orbs. Each of these orbs contains one of those glands. Observe. Ainz and Taylar touch the orbs against each other, and everyone notices the symbols on the orbs all match now. Ainz and Taylar toss the orbs at the newly constructed academy, and everyone watches what happens. All 4 orbs take off in the sky and begin circling the building. After a few minutes, they space themselves out perfectly north, south, east, and west before they start spinning rapidly around the academy. The orbs get lower and lower to the ground until they're digging out the area around the academy. To everyone's amazement, the orbs begin lifting back up, but they bring the entire structure with them and some of the ground they just dug up. The academy gets higher and higher in the sky before they all see Ainz moving his hand toward Karn. The building follows his movements, and soon, the academy is hovering over Karn, following an orbit around the last adamantite wall. It is well above the city, so no one is in danger of running into it even if you were flying, and it makes the sight even more impressive. Not that any of them can see this, but every single person in Karn right now stopped what they were doing and stared at the sky. In any other town, this would cause massive panic, but most of these residents have watched as their rulers create entire neighborhoods with their magic. Ainz looked at Albedo, then Taylar, and couldn't keep the smile off his face. That went exactly as they planned it. While everyone else stared dumbfounded at the sky, Ainz brought them both in and put his arms around their shoulders before saying, "Well, that worked out good." It did. It seems almost every item works better in this world than in Yggdrasil. And now that we are done, Taylar winks at him. How about we go back to Nazarick now? You aren't supposed to leave for the Dwarven Kingdom for a few more days. Ainz is about to agree immediately, but he never gets the chance to. Ainz sees Intoma approach out of the corner of his eye, and he turns toward the Pleiades.
She bows before them before saying,
"Your Majesties, a message from ERANTL. There is an envoy requesting an audience with you. He insists it is urgent." "Where is this envoy from, Intoma?" "The Draconic Kingdom, Your Majesty." Ainz looks at Taylar, and his shoulders sag. Taylar can't help but giggle at his reaction. Well, so much for a few days off. Ainz complains before addressing Intoma. "Tell the envoy to come and meet us in Karn. We will receive him upon his arrival at City Hall."
That's it for today. Remember to show your support to the creator of this story if you enjoyed it. If you would like more parts of the story to be uploaded, leave a comment and subscribe to get notified when the story continues. Bye-bye for now, and I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day.